Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to make a bee-themed card with some of Lawn Fawn's new release. Hope you enjoy! So for this card, I primarily used the Magic Iris Beehive add-on set. And I started by using a piece of paper that's slightly bigger than the beehive and some distress ink in vintage photo. And I just lightly blended the vintage photo all over the paper. I didn't worry too much about blending. I just wanted it to have a nice even cover. Now for this card, I didn't use the Magic Iris mechanism, so I just went ahead and die cut this and kept the middle bit as well. And then using the same vintage photo distress ink, I just added some darker ink and more pressure around the outside of the beehive. And I think this helps to make the shape more interesting. And then I used some washi tape and secured that middle piece onto the rest of the beehive. Now I wanted this beehive to look like it was full of honey, so I used some glossy accents to add some drips of honey along the outside. And I put some along the top, and then I followed the lines going from the left to the right so that my beehive was bursting with honey. And I just used the nozzle of the Glossy Accents bottle to help pull the honey down and make it look like it was dripping. And to make the drips look a little more realistic, I held the beehive up so that gravity would help the glossy accents fall down as well. Now this will take at least an hour or two to dry, so I will leave this to one side and continue with the rest of the card and come back to this once it's completely set. But right now you can see how great those glossy accents look. So for the background behind the beehive, I'm going to start with some Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide, and I'm going to blend it on my background. This is 5 by 7 inches. And I'm just going to leave about 1.5 inches at the bottom where I will put the grass. So I'll just leave that part white. So I wanted the background behind the beehive to be interesting, but not distracting enough that it takes away from the beehive. So what I did is I put some Blueprint Sketch Distress Oxide around the edges, and that helps just to make the inside of the card more of a focal point. And then I used some Perfect Pearls on the background to give it an iridescent look. So this is the blush color of Perfect Pearls, and I just put a little bit in a spray bottle and then mixed in some water and then gave it a really good shake and sprayed this over the background. Now the water will lighten the Distress Oxide and the Perfect Pearls will give it a bit of that iridescent look. So it makes it a bit more interesting than just a plain blue background. So I'm just going to make sure this is completely dry and then add a bit more of that same Blueprint Sketch around the edges. You could skip this step if you prefer, but I think it just helps to further the interest on the background. Now while I've got that Perfect Pearl mixture out, I'm going to use a piece of paper for my grass. And I'm going to start with some mowed lawn and then pine needles Distress Oxide and blend them together. Now with this technique, you don't need to blend them together too much, so it's a good one to try if you're not that confident blending. So I'll again make sure this is completely dry, and then I will die cut it with my grass die from Lawn Fawn. This is the grassy border die, so I'll just line it up and run it through my die cut machine. And then when I put it onto my background, I'll have about 1.5 inches of grass at the bottom of the card. So I'm just going to add some glue And the best way to make sure that all those bits of grass are stuck down is just to smudge the glue over the top of the die cut area and then glue it onto the background. And then once that's secured, I will cut off the excess grass. Now the die set comes with a little tree branch that the beehive can hang from. So I'm going to use a little bit of paper and some ground espresso distress oxide and just have a nice solid blending of that dark brown color. And then I will die cut this branch. And I think it looks better if you glue this branch down so that the end is off the side of the card. And then just trim off that extra little bit of the branch. It just makes the edging of the card more pleasing to the eye. So I'll just trim off that bit there, and then I'll work on my bees. So for the back of the bees, I'm going to use the sparkly yellow glitter cardstock that I have in my stash, and I'm going to die cut 5 of those. You could always use a holographic paper as well. I think that would look quite effective. Now, because this is sparkly cardstock, it's going to be difficult for other cardstock to stick to it. So the top part of the bee I'm going to cut with black cardstock, but I'm going to first put some adhesive sheets on the back of it so that it will stick to that glitter cardstock easily. And this also helps with the antennas of the bees because they will stick down nicely to the background of the card as well. So I'll die cut 5 of those pieces as well for the top part of the bees. And then for the actual wings of the bees, I'm going to use some of the Lawn Fawn vellum. And I'm going to just use a little scrap and die cut 5 sets of wings. And this looks so realistic. It's the perfect finishing touch for these bees. Now putting these bees together is a bit fiddly, but it's well worth the effort. So I'm just going to take off that double-sided adhesive, poke out the pieces, and then put that piece onto the glittered cardstock. And I'll repeat this for all of the bees. You could always cut out some extra bees as well if you wanted to have some on the inside of your card, but you'll see what I added on the inside instead. So once all 5 of those bees are put together, I'm going to add the wings. So I've just put them all upside down. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the back, sort of in the middle there. And then I can add the vellum paper bee wings on the back. Now when you add vellum to glue, it tends to curl once it starts to get wet. So what I did is I just lined up the bees and put on all the wings and then put an acrylic block on the back of it to keep that vellum from curling until it was completely dry. And it only took about 5 minutes or so. Meanwhile, I stamped my sentiments. So I stamped Happy Birthday. This is from the Special Delivery Box add-on, but there's lots of sets that have Happy Birthday in them. And then I used the Henry Jr.'s ABCs. This was in the last Lawn Fawn release. And I spelt out the word beautiful with a B at the beginning. So it's beautiful. And I just put a little bit of a gap in between the B and the rest of the word and used my black pen just to draw in a little dash. And then I cut out these sentiments and put them on black cardstock. Now that my beehive is dry and it looks fabulous with all that dripping honey, I'm going to glue it onto the background so that it's right on the edge of that tree branch. You could always pop this up with foam squares if you prefer, but I wanted it to be flush with the background so that I could have the bees crawling all over it. So I put the 5 bees all over the card And as I mentioned, having that adhesive on the antennas really helped to keep them stuck down. And I think it makes it look more interesting when you have the bees flying in different directions. So once I finish putting my 5 little bees on, I'm going to add my sentiments. So I used some double-sided tape for these and just put the happy birthday at the top on the left there. And then the beautiful in the middle on the grass. And I just love this stamp set, the Henry Jr.'s ABCs, because it allows you to make custom sentiments just like this. So then I'm going to put my card onto a 5x7-inch card base. And for the inside of the card, instead of putting additional bees like I normally would, I stamped "Have a Happy Day." This is from the Scooting By set. And then I used some of my extra die cuts. I always have a little dish of extra dies that I have left over from projects. And I had a few flowers in there. So I just added some flowers around that "Have a Happy Day" sentiment. And I think that helps to add a little splash of color on the inside of the card. And now you can see the finished card with those beautiful flowers on the inside and that gorgeous honey dripping beehive on the outside. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!